I'm going to go finish going live before I share my screen. Okay, so looks like we didn't really have anything that anyone's added yet. Looks like someone's typing in some stuff, so maybe we will soon.
Is me, and
All
yes.
right, great. Let's say I'll take it. Also just take a look at PRs. Oh, I think I bookmarked this. What's the search again? Look for. And it's like org, O-R-G.
Yes, yeah. Sorry, I was trying to say that I was muted.
So we do have 11 open PRs. Oh, okay. I didn't see your PR about simple words yet.
The
Several
plain
draft
words.
PRs. Okay.
I do want to really quickly point out about that I think I remember a conversation in the past about simple being uncomfortable language for some people, and that the preferred language was plain language as opposed to simple, or plain words as opposed to simple words. But it's a file name, it's not right. I'm just it's not like public or anything. I just want to remember that.
That's, I think, I was mostly trying to use it for the documentation. It's pretty minor. It's like good to change it where we can. However, in terms of the file being called simplified words, I don't think there's, is there an equivalent for simplified words? Plainified words? Doesn't seem as good as
Or
just
plain words.
Well, it specifically is like a mapping, and so I think simplified is good. It's good because it's like, it's not just here's the list of plain words. It's, oh, here's the complicated word, or the more complicated word to the plain word on the
Sure.
And so I don't know.
I think we could replace simple here with plain language. I mean, I think that's fine.
Yeah, that's a good call.
I think simpler still helps people understand. Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. I'm going to open an issue for that. I could show off the rate my PDF stuff. I have to still figure out to confirm that it works with or the Let's Encrypt is working the way that it's supposed to. But I can talk about that. Actually, I should put that on the list. That's a lot of what I was working on. Oh, you already have it on there. You added it. Great. All right, perfect. So looks like a big change. Looks like you sorted it first. And so that this change here isn't sorting. You've added 1,500 new phrases, Michelle. Yeah, give us a little summary of what you found.
So so there were just a bunch of new phrases on the new source. There were also phrases that like I added options where there weren't. I think it'd be good for folks to look at the ones that are changed, just to make sure that they fit. But there are a bunch of them. But I just took when there were when there were options that were included in one and not the other, I just made a list or added to the existing list. That was all.
Okay.
And other than that, they're just new. I think there were situations, it's not a direct one-to-one with the list I found on the website, because it would have stuff in parentheses that wouldn't match up with any phrase, right? Or didn't match the format that this was in. Yeah. And sometimes I took phrases that were like, I don't remember, in consideration No, not in consideration of. There were some phrases that were like 3 words that sometimes I did the 3-word and I also did a 1-word version that I wasn't as sure about, but I think they were all reasonable. I tried to err on the side of sticking to what was there as opposed to modifying.
Okay. One thing we're gonna have to watch out for is Britishisms and spelling.
We could do both, but yeah.
I think we probably could. I think I'm okay with just sticking with standard English, American English spellings.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, I did not.
Let's just see how many eyes
I
as we
did
have.
not scan for that. Spelling is not my forte, so.
Yeah, a bit, yeah.
There are not that many, it doesn't look like to me.
Yeah, anybody who wants to, if I do not get to it, like when you're done making the suggestions, just make a batch commit. And what like you can change this in whatever ways you want. I just. did
Yeah, I
mine.
probably should have done it as a review. You're right.
Well, you can add them in a batch commit, even if it's not as a review, just so you know. But
Okay.
I don't mind anyone editing or like you can do whatever you want with this. This was just, my attempt to.
All right, I think that was it. It was just like 4 or 5.
Okay.
Oh, we already had finalize and finalize both versions.
Yeah, there were definitely places where I felt like choices weren't that much plainer, like they could be better, but since they're legal terms, I decided that was not my purview, and we weren't changing, I think there was a goal of just not changing them much anyway.
I mean, I
So,
think that makes sense. Like, I know I did take your suggestion for one of the replacements.
yeah,
And I think something to keep in mind too is sometimes it's not just about a more common vocabulary word, but about simplifying the sentence structure.
Mm,
That
fair
could,
enough.
that might sometimes be the reason for certain changes.
Maybe.
Okay. Well, I'm really interested to see, and then we can, some of these are going to just be way more common in narratives than like letters that people send than court forms too.
Yeah.
And it's been very interesting just to try forms and see what things get suggested as replacements and then see if they actually are good or not. Because like
Yeah.
here, initial first. That's not right.
Yeah.
There's going to be lots of places where forms ask for an initial.
Yeah.
And it's not meaning
We
the
could
first thing.
specifically look for middle initial, I think. I mean, I think there are ways we could change
We
this,
can't,
but
I think the idea is
to keep it simple is, yeah.
we can't do that. We can't anticipate every possible weird thing it's
Yeah,
gonna be.
that's
That's
true.
just, yeah.
That's very true.
It did make me think, like, actually, I really want this highlight to be on both sides, but that's a bigger change to my algorithm.
Oh,
I
yeah.
like to be on both sides.
It would have been nice.
Is it a bigger change? What would you?
I think I just need to change the return value so it has one extra tuple. It's not necessarily a huge one, but then I have to make sure I just copy it all the way down.
Yeah.
So I already do need to know the original location of it in the phrase. Although no,
you've
maybe
got
not.
the word, I was about to say, if you've got the word that you're changing in the phrase, don't you already know the original location or no?
No, because sometimes there's partial matches, right? And we're really careful about how we do that.
Oh, sorry, I'm doing this a completely different way. No, okay.
Well, let's say if we took this and said, oh, we got the word additional and we replaced it with this one, but then we had a phrase which kept additional in place. And they were like, oh, let's highlight all the times that additional appears in the original phrase. It will be an extra search for one, which may not be a big deal, but if we're processing a lot of text, it might be. And then I feel like I thought of that approach early and was like, no, I can't just search afterwards. That was breaking some stuff at one point. That was the first way I did this. And
Hmm,
it might have just been I had to escape the text properly. That might have been the only issue. But
okay.
yeah, this seemed like it's going to be more robust. And I think there might have been some other issues. I can't remember for sure.
Sure.
And then here where there's like slashes, I don't know. Anyway, this is what I think is the best test. And we have to try it and then just see with some real forms, like, does this look like a good one or is it mostly wrong in people when it gets caught? If we did a middle initial, what would we do? We would replace middle initial with itself, like keep it alone, and then
Yeah,
that way
I
it
think
wouldn't
that's
capture.
that is the patch way of doing a lot of this of like, oh, this thing doesn't make sense. And it's because of a context that's immediately before or after, just add the context with itself. And then add the context to that phrase and then replace it with itself. Since we're doing the larger to smaller ones, it like is how we're searching.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And did you have initial? You took out initial? Because I don't see it here in order. Doesn't look like there's any context missing.
Does it have to be in order anymore? I'd search.
You might search the page initially. I didn't take it out. I don't think. I didn't take anything out other than the and or at the other commit. So I don't know.
Oh, there's initial, but it's just in a totally different location. Okay.
Well, because it's the length, right?
Yeah.
It's by length, not alphabetical.
We could switch it and sort it by alphabetical now because we're sorting it by length every time we load it.
That might be more
Oh.
useful for people to be able to see changes in context.
Okay. I mean, that would
Um,
be super easy.
Okay.
No, I don't.
that's
I
what
think we
did.
should. I think we should merge this first and then
Yeah.
resort. But yeah,
Okay, got it.
Hmm.
I didn't realize we'd switch to sorting them alphabetically later on, so got it.
Yeah, no, it's not alphabetical. It's by length so that we can
Length,
then-
I mean.
Yeah.
length, yeah.
I
Yeah, we
had
don't-
not thought we were going to do that. And then I realized, yeah, performance wise, now it's not a big difference.
No.
And it's just going to be more reliable. Okay, well, yeah, I guess I'll just merge those special spelling issues, the new ones that didn't have the American spelling, and then this seems worth merging to me, and then we'll just have to see how it goes with some testing. All right,
Yeah.
great, thank you for that. All right, any other PRs? Let's see. This one seems like it should be ready for us to merge. What's holding that one up?
which one is this one?
Oh, I totally forgot about this. Sorry.
Oh, I guess this
I
does need
was
a little bit
supposed
of
to do
changes.
something. Yeah.
All right, so
would
this was about
think I
the
probably
collapse in the
wanted to
display
discuss it.
template. Ended up being a big change.
Which issue is this? This is
It
toolbox.
is on AL Toolbox.
174.
Okay, so this is more whenever it's ready, we can probably merge it. This is mostly to improve AL kiln test ability of things. You're muted, Michelle.
It was initially, but I did notice that there were issues with accessibility and consistency and just like the level of robustness of the, I guess what I'm saying is if there's nothing urgent about it. So there's nothing I think is broken about it other than that the subject doesn't appear for ones where I don't remember, I put it in there. Where like
Yeah.
I think it's up there in the first comment somewhere. There's one where the subject doesn't appear at all.
I think it's
So,
the display template one, right? Like there's some
the
things that
display template.
display template is not really used a lot. Collapse
Okay.
template is used a lot. I do use display template in some interviews to do things like scrollable terms of use, and we're trying to merge that into mass access repository too.
Yeah, so the copy button display template, doesn't show the subject unless it's also being collapsed. So
Okay.
that was a thing.
I think as long as we're like not breaking other interviews, it's okay to get a little refactor. It is funny like how you create these dependencies with these little tools, because all this is doing is just letting people avoid a very small amount of bootstrap
Yeah.
by hand. But I think there's
I
some
think
places
it's
where it's
not a-
really helpful
Yeah,
because
it's
of,
not a trivial amount of bootstrap, and people, if they don't understand bootstrap, then it's a big lift, I think.
yeah,
So I
the
think it
biggest thing
is,
is knowing
yeah.
like where to put the IDs and the targets for things with the collapsible stuff, especially
Yeah.
make sure they work correctly.
And especially like doing something that's more accessible, I think might also be useful. Yeah.
Okay,
I think
so
I
this
think
does
it's
still
the
need
things
some
to keep
revisions.
in
I think we had basically said we wanted to shorten some of the new parameters, right? That was one of the main things, and then avoid making some of the CSS parameterized because we were okay with just like putting a structure on people's choices there.
I don't remember where we landed. Yeah.
My main thing was let people pass in a single ID, and then everything else can be based on that ID. And then probably the same with the class, like,
Excuse me.
or maybe not the same with class, but yeah.
I'm gonna move. Sorry.
So yeah, I have to reread. 74. I totally didn't catch this. I think I think the ID, I will switch it around so the ID is on the container and the constructed ID that is not used for styling, that is just used for that is just used for accessibility and for functionality is the one that is the generated ID. Because then, to meet people's expectations. So I'm just going to flip what you said.
That's probably fine, as long as we're, treating it like no one has been doing anything with it so far, which they probably haven't. I think I'm okay with that.
Yeah. I mean, that's the only reason I say it is because you folks have said that they haven't been using the ID. If we think they have, then I won't switch it.
I don't think anybody's been using the ID. Sorry, I missed a little bit when moving around, but I might have to move again a little while too. Sorry.
Yeah. Sorry, was there a question in there? I was trying to review the comment. I'm not good at
Nope, no question.
multitasking.
No,
Okay.
I don't think you missed anything, but it was mostly Michelle. Both Michelle and I were rereading my large comment at the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess let me just take a look at this mass access.
Maybe I'll just message you later, Bryce.
That's
Fine, I
pretty
get
fun, yeah.
that. Yeah. Okay.
Just look at the mass access PR. This was for the terms of use. It says it's approved, but okay, we're still waiting for David, and we have to probably integrate his changes still.
Yeah.
From the University Council. I guess maybe we just do the changes they said, and if we can, I assume they don't care what order the provisions are in. I know we're going to double check that, but I'm tempted just to merge it with keeping their language, but pushing it to a lower section where it's less confusing to people.
That's fair.
Let me just see if David.
Yeah, it's definitely not I would say definitely not a priority if we
Yeah.
Like, I don't know if we want to ping David on it right now, but
Yeah, okay, you're probably right.
Yeah, he's a
especially
bit,
because he's not going to do anything until some of the other stuff is off his plate. And I think some of the other stuff involves council. It involves someone else from the university, and so like, yeah, I know so they're not going to get to it either until they get to their part. But yeah, I think that's probably a good idea. And then just so this isn't hanging around, and then when we do want to have a release of it. Although we want to make sure I do need to update prod soon, so we want to make sure that if we merge it, it is something that would be okay with being on prod.
Yeah, is that actually something for us?
That's
or maybe you could
that's a
release
thing about-
prod now and just merge it after. Well, I don't know.
I was saying that
Maybe
we
worth
could do that. We could do that, but I feel it would mostly just look like when you were kind of antsy on pulling the trigger on that now, which I understand. But
No, it's just like a lingering PR, but you're right, it's not necessarily urgent.
okay.
By the way, should we, if like one thing that came to mind when I was making that PR that it didn't have any issue associated with it. Should we make issues for the PRs that we make? Like not, not always, but just as a general rule kind of
Yeah,
thing.
I am conflicted on some of that stuff. The stuff I've seen people do, some projects have it very strict. You need to have an issue first, and then you do the PR.
Yeah.
My take, I don't really mind. GitHub searching searches both PRs and issues, and that's mostly what I will use to like try to find something about it. And sometimes if you have an issue and you have a PR, like
the conversation gets split.
the conversation gets split, and it's like, yes, and it's then that I feel is more annoying than like knowing that, like not knowing if something was an issue first.
But like if you're searching, often I search issues as opposed to just searching the whole repo because I don't trust that whole repo search. It often misses things. So,
Weird.
or at
I
least
feel like I have the
it
opposite.
misses them. It misses them in code, I suppose.
Yeah, I don't miss things in code, but I think it will do both.
Maybe it's better.
I've had
Yeah.
success with issues and pull requests.
Yeah, maybe.
But I feel, at least for me, splitting the conversation is more annoying than splitting the PR, or than like having to split search for going back and things later. Such that I think my general like rule of thumb, I don't know if it's a thing we want to make up policy for or anything, is like issues are for you haven't started writing any code, or most you have like, here's a sketch of something. It doesn't integrate with anything yet. And like but when you don't have any code and when you're trying to like map out what exactly that code would look like or what the refactor or architecture or whatever should be, once you have the code, everything and all the conversation goes in the PR. And if for some reason it's like, oh, this is not the right way to do it, we're going to have to start from square one, you just close the PR. And you can always go back to the issue then. But I feel most of the time, if it's like you already have the code and you already have the PR, I don't really think it makes sense to then like make an issue for it, jump immediately back to the PR, and then
put all your comments there.
Yeah. And if it was, and my thing is if it's small enough to do a PR for like without having to make an issue, then that's probably fine. And you wouldn't have made an issue anyway. But those are just my thoughts. I don't know if y'all also have thoughts on that.
Yeah, I think I still feel a bit more ambivalent than that, but I don't feel strongly enough to push on that. Okay.
You're always welcome to make more issues. I feel like mostly just this, like I probably
As a
won't, like,
policy thing, yeah.
yeah, as a policy, like I personally am not going to make, if I have a quick PR, I'm not going to make a tiny issue for it and then open the PR. I'm just going to try and keep everything in the PR if I can.
Yeah. But this, for example, became a longer, it didn't become, it wasn't so quick, right?
Yeah.
But there
Um,
again, you had some working stuff. And I
Yeah.
think we were able to see all the discussion in one place.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the other thing is I feel like it's PR, even PR conversations are always, at least for me, more useful than issue conversations because you end up having to describe like so much of the detail in the issue. It's like, oh, yeah, I'd just rather see code on it. And so PR, it's like, oh, you can exactly see the code and you can comment on the very specific things you want to.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, and I don't feel like that was an issue having that long of a conversation on the PR.
Okay.
So
Okay. I like our PR conversations. I think they're very productive sometimes. So, but yeah. Okay.
Yeah, I think one thing I would say there is like, if we know we're have the time to do it in a meeting, sometimes one that gets to be a really long thread, it might be good
Yes.
to just to do it live rather than
Yeah.
back
Yeah.
and forth on the.
Well, if it happens on a like Tuesday and the next conversation is going to be on a Monday, you know, but sometimes it doesn't matter so much.
Yeah, depends on a lot on like how urgent the discussion is, and but I will say, yeah, it just depends on also balancing that with the fact that writing comments in text can just be really slow to communicate. So
Yeah.
is it worth
That's
2
true.
hours of discussion back and
Yeah.
forth, even if it's urgent in some way,
Yeah.
versus just saving it for the next week? It's probably okay.
Sure.
Save it for the next week.
Sure.
In general, like about the policy stuff, I think it's kind of good to have some rules of thumb. But try to remember policies can be its own burden. I know that's not always true for everybody, Michelle. Like I know you like to have the rules to remember because it helps make fewer decisions.
Structure, yes.
Not true for everybody though. Sometimes it just
Yeah.
that becomes a burden.
Yeah.
That's how I tend to feel, even though some like, oh, maybe it would have been better to follow the rule, but that we could have made. But the burden of having a lot of rules to remember is not trivial for me particularly. So
Yeah. That's fine. Yeah.
and we're all doing this gradually. If we want to like let new people join our team, the more rules we have to learn,
Yeah.
that becomes a more generalized concern, right? Like it's not that having more rules is bad when new people start.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
just that it's more, it takes a higher upfront time to learn them.
Yep. I also, I think like these, I was less considering rules as general guidelines, like not something that, you know, has to block anything. Just like, do we want like would it be more comfortable for people to me if I had made an issue, right? Would that have been more useful to people? But it sounds like not. So I mean, you know, I think
yeah, that's the thing about it.
I want to, you know, per like very situational, then that's fine too.
I guess well, that's a really good point, Michelle. It's like if it's just a policy and it's just the three of us, we're 99% of all of the traffic on our repos. And so if we're just like, yeah, let's try and do this instead, it's not a rule, but it's like we will actually effectively make all the change we need by just being like, yeah, let's us three try and do that.
Also, I do think that people who are not the three of us make issues or more actively participate in issues than they do in PRs, or that has seemed to be the way it happens to me. But for example, for this, I don't expect anyone outside of us to be really engaging with it. So again, it's situational. Though I guess if people are using the ID, that would be useful for them to know. but I don't think they would have seen it on there anyway.
I think we only get engagement in issues and PRs when we directly invite people to suggest.
That's true.
And we do tend to do it at the issue stage. I think you're totally right, because then it guides our coding.
Yeah.
Um,
But in this case, I don't
Yeah.
think that would have been useful. I mean, yeah, I don't know. If we want to ask Michael or something, or I mean Matt or Caroline, whether they use the ID at all, but I really doubt. I don't know why anybody would have used the ID to style that
I
element.
think they would. Honestly, well,
Like, it's not there for styling, so
I can do a like immediate search of Aleo's like main CSS and see, and I don't think,
but I
like,
mean,
yeah.
you wouldn't be able to search for.
you could search, I could search for all the times they're using an ID, like the hash in a CSS file. And
Oh, sure.
And be
Yeah,
able
it's
to-
probably not going to be very much anyway of that.
yeah, would be 5 max, and I'd be able to see, oh yeah, this one is definitely the like specific template. But I don't think they've been doing anything on that.
Yeah, I
So-
haven't seen them use a lot of IDs in general. Yeah.
Okay. I can share my screen again, or if people want, I just realized because I unplugged my monitor, my Zoom
Mm.
window, which has your faces, is in some invisible space I can't access.
Oh no.
Oh yeah, the ghost on your machine.
Yeah, I could
Um,
leave and come back, I guess, but I think
Are
we
you
could
host though, and you're recording? So
I am recording, so I don't really know what happened.
yeah, it'll
So,
stop the recording.
I might just
Yeah.
turn off the screen share frequently so I can still see you.
Okay.
All right, rate my PDF is up next. That could be a longer discussion. It could be some sharing stuff. You bumped the playwright stuff from last week. We have, I guess, the PDF JS is another Kiln discussion.
Yeah, those are both
Should
cool.
we have those
Yeah,
first before I
those
rate my
are
PDF? What are people's
exciting.
feelings?
Up to you, Michelle.
I think they could be pretty short, but I also think they're not super urgent at the moment, just because where I'm at. So
Sure.
like
Okay.
like they're going to be theoretical discussions that will be exciting sometime in the future. So
PDF.js sorry, I put that on there just more as a like note of like it can do the things we want. And I have like little issues for it.
yeah, I forgot I did a whole bunch of searching on that, and PDF.js, I agree, is totally it's heavy, but if we want to
Sure.
compare PDFs, that's the way to go. I was also surprised at how hard it was to find ways to compare docx contents, but that's a different thing. Yeah, I think PDF.js is going to be our way to go if we want to implement that.
I think it's a good library for us to learn. There are a couple other things that touches on, like one is if we want to do automated conversion of what do you call them, live cycle forms, we might need PDF.js. Some of the things we've been talking about with embedding PDF images in the results, we could do, probably worth us doing PDF.js in an iframe or something like that.
That's
Versus
been my
letting-
thought, yeah.
Yeah,
That's really only if we need like if we want people to be able to like look around at everything outside of just the image. So but yeah.
yeah. Because right now we do have one place in the Weaver where we show a embedded PDF in an iframe. And not an iframe, sorry, it's using the embed tag. And it relies on the browser having a version of the PDF renderer that works that way, which is not true on mobile devices. But we could just use PDF.js there and solve that use case. That actually ties to one issue on the assembly line where, like, when DocAssemble fails to render a thumbnail for a PDF, it just shows a white box on the preview page. We have that on all of our Weaver generated.
Why would it fail to, sorry, continue.
It just times out. It doesn't necessarily fail. It just
Hmm.
gives it a very short time to generate the thumbnail.
Oh, okay.
And if you're doing a big PDF that takes a long time to generate, that all cuts into the time.
But I mean, it's a thumbnail, right? I mean, couldn't it just generate the first page?
No,
It just-
PDFs don't work like that. You have to read the entire PDF file. I don't know if you'd have to like render the entire PDF, but you have to read the entire file and like parse it all into memory, like the PDF structures, before you can actually start rendering any of your pages. There
It's
isn't like a,
screen-based system. It's like,
Yeah.
it was designed for printing. Well, it's like a compiled version of PostScript, which was designed for printing. And think of it as like a memory dump.
Okay. Wow. Okay.
Not the best engineered file format because it arose organically.
Yeah. Unlike JavaScript, but hey. Yeah, okay. Then that's the way it is. Got it. I think next project, build an alternative to PDFs.
Like we're stuck with PDFs, unfortunately. But
You think so?
Um,
yeah.
All right.
anyway, for now, like the PDF.js stuff is just like, yeah, we should start to become familiar with it on our team, but maybe eventually we should think about whether it should be listed on this as well as other things. we could do. All
Okay.
right. Maybe let's touch on the production update next, actually. Anything, any barriers that you would want, Bryce, anything that any support you think we would need to have to do, just do the upgrade? To see if there's bugs that are fixed.
Yeah, I'm not super sure. Yeah, it's like one of those. I think I just get really antsy about touching production, and I don't know if there'd be better stuff that would help me be like, oh yeah, if I update this on production, we won't break anything. It's just a tall ask. So I mostly I've been putting it off because I don't remember it until or rethink about it until like later in the day for some reason, and then by the time I do, it like is like too late because I want to be able to update things and then keep an eye out on like the air email stuff and see if anything pops up so I can try and like fix it pretty quickly. And I don't want to do that like at 5 and then have it be broken for 12 hours.
Yep.
But that's just mostly me. I don't know why I put it on there. I think it was mostly just a to-do item for me, and I could have just put it on my like personal list, and I'll just do it right after we get off this call. So.
Okay, so you feel this is a good week to do it. You'll be able to do the things that will help you feel better about it.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. I mean, it's why CI/CD is a thing, right? To avoid why people do DevOps stuff in general, is to have releases be less of a big deal every time you do them.
It's less. I feel like it's less about the CI/CD stuff because it's like the process is not the thing that would be hard. It's you log in and then it's 3 clicks, but it's our general. We got some Kiln stuff, but we do have a general lack of tests and things that are not testable with some Docassemble parts, like just the way we run Kiln, we can't see if updating Docassemble will automatically break it. And the way Docassemble updates, it could still automatically break something for long-running containers. Like just smaller things like that is what worries me. All that to say, less of the CI/CD and more of like more tests, the better always. And I feel like we have a bit of gaps there. So, yeah,
makes sense. It might need to be a container upgrade. I don't know for sure, but it might be worth doing because I do know
yes,
there's a change that requires a change log.
Mhm.
Sorry, in the change log, I think I saw something indicating container upgrade will be needed to get the new version. I mean, I don't like to stay too far behind on those releases because then upgrades are less reliable, as we discussed.
Yeah. We were pretty far behind. We're at like 4.12, I think. Or yeah, 1.4.12.
Yeah, let me see what the container version is. What container version is 1.4.9, so that's pretty close to the release version. 1.4.12, but let's see. I think we just had one container update. 21. 4.21 was the only one that had an update to the container, it looks like. So, okay. Or what does he call it? Sometimes he calls it a system.
Yeah, I was trying to do the same search.
44. Oh, this the Google Fonts is available. Pandocs upgraded. We don't use Pandoc stuff.
That's what it is. Okay, yeah.
Before you do a container upgrade,
Mhm.
make sure the backups work. So I always like to download the database file. Or something I've started to do since I got burned by it once.
Mhm.
From S3.
And just load it locally.
And just make, you don't have to necessarily run it locally, just keep a copy. If it looks like it's a realistic size for the database, then and you can see like how it's changed from the night before. Just poke around a couple of the backup folders to see
Oh,
does
yeah.
the database look like it's the real database, or did it like get cut off halfway through, or is it way more than it should be?
Okay.
Just a quick sanity check. Okay, so the rate my PDF stuff, maybe I'll jump into that. Write down the notes. So I got Rate My PDF working on Fast API. Bryce, you had added it. What do you think would be the most helpful thing to discuss on the call?
I added it because you were talking about it.
I guess what I'm going to do is just try. I mean, it has a really important feature, which is that it will process the PDFs in the background now.
Yeah.
So I copied over all the styles in the existing code and then just updated them all so they work on Fast API instead of Flask. So it should be a pretty should be a relatively safe change.
Mhm.
Just do like a quick overview of it, I guess. What I could do is I could try setting up a domain name and just making sure that the Docker stuff works correctly for the public domain name with the renewing SSH and everything. Yes. That's the one test I think that might be good to do.
Yeah, sure. There is, I haven't ever gotten it, like done a ton of stuff with it, but there is like a Let's Encrypt test server that you can do some quick things with, but I haven't. But that's mostly just to make sure everything is sort of working well on that side, and I don't know how well it would work with just making sure everything is like a full front to back.
I did get it working, so it works with Docker Compose, and you can run it locally, which is helpful for iterating. Maybe, I don't remember, you had suggested a change, which I should be able to just find, to the Flask version to make it so we didn't have to build Form Fixer every time. But it does seem like every time when you want to deploy the Docker version, it does require rebuilding the Form Fixer repo. There was one weird thing, which was
the Docker file.
This is the Docker Compose. Here's the Docker file. I think I ended up having I did this because I wasn't sure if I could put the GitHub repo into the requirements.txt.
Yeah, you can. But the thing is why it's doing it every time is because you want to run that, which I'm realizing now is probably why it's doing it one. you need to run that before you copy in dot, like the current directory, because it'll run everything. And then if it notices, like it'll go back to the first time that like, oh, so one of these files has changed and everything in the current directory will have changed. If you're like editing, or something in the current directory will have changed when you're editing things. It will always go back, copy everything in, and then it will always go back and rerun pip. And so I would do pip install form fixer first, then pip install requirements. Unless you think that we will be iterating on form fixer a lot, like, because that's the other thing is I know sometimes is you do a lot of back and forth of like adding a thing in form fixer and at the same time doing it here. At which point you could, I think you can put GitHub links in requirements.txt. And so I would just put that link in the requirements. And when you want to change it, you just kind of make a touch requirements.txt and it should reinstall it all. So.
But I had to install a Git before this would work, but I guess that's still fine. Would it
That's
just
still
look
fine,
just like this?
Yes, yeah.
I think I was trying a couple things and then I didn't. So it would just be like this in the requirements of text.
It should be. Requirements, I'm pretty sure it's just like a list of things that you would have passed to and git pip install. So
that makes a lot of sense. Okay.
Yeah.
And then were you saying that it should happen before I do the copy dot?
It should happen before you do the copy dot. Probably before you do workdir. I'm not sure if workdir makes a difference for the cache, Docker cache stuff, but
and then I would edit this. What would I edit? To force
so
it to reload.
if you wanted to force it to reload, you would touch requirements.txt. Like if requirements.txt has noticed that it's changed since then it will start at that point.
And touch should work just as a date-based timestamp thing.
Yes.
Okay.
I think if it's a date-based timestamp thing. I'll double check that, and if it's not adding like a space to it, I'll double check.
Okay. I don't know why I did this here. I think it shouldn't be necessary, right? I should be able to do it here in the requirements.txt as well. They're separate containers. RQ is running in its own container.
Oh, if it's in its own container, then that's a different Docker.
But it should still. That was one thing I wasn't quite sure about with Docker. It seems like we're doing these steps for everything.
Sorry, is it a different container but the same image? Are we running the same image?
Docker Compose. That's what I was realizing.
Can you go back to the Docker Compose?
Seems like when you say image, do you mean the base image?
So
it's
there's
inside one Docker Compose.
Okay, so Docker Compose, there's the image, which is just like all of the files that you need to run that particular thing. The container is the version of it's actually running. Docker Compose just does multiple of those. And so it looks like you have worker build dot. And build, you have two build dots, which means that's like it's saying for the image for this container, use the Docker file and build that as the image. So it is the same container just running twice, which I don't, if that's what we want, sure, but
it's only running a different file. The entry point's different, I guess, huh? In terms of what it actually runs.
Yeah, command is the different thing there. Which I guess is fine because it's still most of the same code.
It's really, let me see. Let's look
like
at
the backend should have all of the same code, or like the worker should have all of this access to all the same code that you do on the normal backend. So that I guess is right. It feels weird, but
that's what I was thinking. I was looking, I was like, this seems like I'm just doing the same thing in two different. Well, I'm gonna mix up I guess it's a container.
Yeah, so I'm not super sure why you need two containers for it though. Like why that's the default.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I do necessarily.
But I think this is the thing I know I'm bad at is sometimes it's like, oh, containers, like each individual thing should be its own container, whereas in my mind, a worker is just an extra process. So it could be in the original container.
I guess it does allow me to distribute the worker.
Yeah, that's probably the better idea.
For workers, that's one reason. And given that the code that it has is pretty small, maybe it's simplest to keep it together like this, but I don't know for sure. It does make it easier to test it locally, that it's in the same directory. But
Yeah.
that's not a big issue. And then here, this should probably just be in the requirements subtext. That's what I think we've established, that this could definitely be in the requirements subtext.
Yes, yeah, that definitely can.
So I'll move that over too.
Okay.
And I'll make sure this works still with this order, but not after setting the worker. But that means it won't be rebuilding all the requirements every time, in other words, when I do a deploy.
Yes.
That's the difference I've done there with the Docker build. Okay. Let's see. And I actually had run into this before, but we hadn't tried it yet. So Traffic kind of does the reverse proxy and in SSL as one process, which is pretty nice.
Okay, I didn't see that.
So that definitely helps us with deploying SSL as long as it actually works. So I have to make sure. And then Redis is its own container. That's a configurable path. So if you don't want to use Redis on the, point it to somewhere like AWS's Redis thing if you for some reason had really high scale with usage.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. There is this twist where like the PDF files directory, to make that a volume that can be seen by the worker and by the main container. I had to make that a volume. And
that's good.
It didn't make sense to make /temp a volume. So when you run it locally, you do have to specify where you want the
that's fine.
folders to be stored.
Yeah, that's fine. And that's honestly, I think that I was one of the improvements that I was like, yeah, we actually probably do want it to be a volume. So if we ever want to go back and like look at all the forms that people have uploaded, like look at the forms people are using this with and be like, oh, should we add these to our database? Or like, well, just a general, like, what are people using this for? Do we need to expand our use cases or anything? Like that would be super useful to just have all this still around.
And we do need to tell people what we're doing with them, actually, now that I think about it. That was a question that someone had when I shared it on one of
that not in our private
calls?
I thought that
There's
was
no terms of use. There's no terms of use that we link to yet.
Oh yeah, we don't. Okay, cool.
So yeah, so I'm tempted to just deploy this pretty soon. I think where we are right now with Write My PDF, people have been trying it out kind of randomly. I don't think anyone has it integrated into a workflow where they're relying on us having it available, but or staying the same.
I don't think that's a thing that we should say that like we've decided that like, yeah, this is a thing that it's there if you want to use it. We're not giving guarantees about it like staying the same or having any sort of stable API. So.
Yeah. This is saying there's an error, but I don't know. I don't think I'd run into this error. I guess I should make sure that's still working before I deploy.
I don't trust VS Code's Python checking sometimes with like with frameworky sort of stuff. It's never been super great.
Yeah.
Why is RQ used in this? That was the other thing I was going to ask is like if you've got is it on a branch or a repo anywhere?
It's all in the main repo because my Write My PDF was my experimental repo. And I was thinking
it's on the main repo? I didn't see any branches. The PDF,
its own
DocSimple PDF stats?
It's not in DocSimple PDF stats. I did it in a new repo. Because it didn't really seem to me that it was, I mean, I guess it's a big enough refactor that it was easier for me just to, well, whatever. Anyway, this is a choice I made. I made a new repo. I figured we could archive the old one.
That's fine. I just wanted to know what it was. Okay.
and there's some instructions there.
Nice. Okay.
So you were asking about Redisque?
Well, mostly just I wanted to do a quick look at just like code review of it, just to see what you had been doing. So sorry.
Yeah, if you want to look at it before I deploy anything, there's no PR because it's just its own repository, but
Alright.
there might be some things to change or to tweak. But I think it'll be an easier base for us to work from.
Yeah.
I could be wrong, but anyway, it's where I
Okay.
integrated all of the work to do the background processing. So I guess it's going to be better for that reason.
Yes. Yeah.
Nothing else. Yeah, I guess what I should try is make sure that getting the SSL certificate works at some other domain that I control, I guess, and the subdomain, and just or spin up a new container for it somewhere, so we can confirm that part before I try to deploy it live. Not that it's that big of a deal, I guess, to just turn it off and then the other one back on. But yeah, it should be a bit easier ultimately, and I can't think of anything else to really say about it yet.
Cool. That's fair.
Okay, so I think the next one is just the playwright question. Michelle, you want to talk? I know you ended up having to leave a bit early last week. Bryce and I just talked about it a little bit, but we don't know the context or what your thoughts were there, or what the scope of the change could be. Essentially, that was one of our big questions: is this a big refactor? Is it just adding a new thing that does new stuff?
So if we go to Playwright, so one thing is we might be able to do it piecemeal either way. If we go to Playwright, it might be an easier transition in some ways. I started to do some research on Playwright versus Cypress. But apparently I missed out on writing down some of my notes. So gonna have to redo some of that research. For some reason, I was leaning more towards Cypress than Playwright, maybe because of their output. But if we can figure out how to use their output in CI, they have so much amazing output. Like you basically can just replay the test yourself. And explore exactly what went on instead of having these little snapshots. And I think that might be, if we can get that working, that might be the biggest advantage. It's just that I don't know if they will have the affordances that we need, like being able to pass tests that failed. I think that'll be more of a Cucumber thing. So I think it will still be under our control, just for internal tests and for things like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Like there's just a few things that I don't know if they have that I want to make sure they have before we start making any huge changes. I'm in the issue for this. I started writing a list of kind of what we would want or need from it. So I think more so for Bryce and for Quentin, if you have thoughts on needs that we have, things that, I mean, also a list of like nice to haves, but mostly a list of like, these are things we need to have. I think I mixed them up, so I might need to untangle that a bit. Things that we need to have in order to approve a transition. That would help with the research, so I don't remember which issue number that is, but
It would be on the AL Kiln repo.
yeah, on the AL Kiln repo. So that is, again, this may not happen anytime soon, so no rush, but I think that could be an incredibly useful thing for our users, because it would just they do have a way to hide and redact sensitive information. So
A lot of that happens at the GitHub Actions level, just so you know. GitHub Actions automatic, like if anything that matches the secret that you pass into it is printed
no,
to
no,
a
no,
log,
there's
it's
stuff
doing
that happens at the Cypress and Playwright level.
What
That you
more
can
are you?
say that
Right.
for example, on their output, on the Cypress and Playwright output, it will hide fields that you want redacted.
You mean for
and that
screenshots
kind
and
of
stuff like
thing,
that?
for screenshots and things.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that
yeah.
was like one of the big priorities for me, and I believe they both have that. Which makes sense, but you never know. So
I'm just saying this was almost exactly 2 years ago that you first created this issue.
yeah, and 2 years ago, I'm not sure we would have made the switch, because they were not where they are now, or at
It's a
least
better
Playwright wasn't.
library.
Like
Playwright was pretty good.
Playwright was much newer and would not have had the things that we needed, but it's grown a lot. So yeah, so it's good to take a second look. And I didn't know about Cypress, so I don't know where they were 2 years ago. I suspect in a similar place, because they seem to have developed on a similar trajectory.
I think the big concern, well, the general concern that we had last week that we talked about was, what is the refactor risk, right? So if we're taking something that works and changing it, it can be, generally those projects take a lot more time than people expect to do.
It would take a
So
long
you get to
time.
the same feature parity.
I would hope that we would be able to do it piecemeal. That would be my hope. And that it wouldn't slow things down too much to have both in the repository before completely transitioning. That is another question, is how we would handle the transition, because I don't want to have to, I don't know if we can handle having two like diverging branches that really diverge that wildly, you know. So if it turns out that we can't do the transition piecemeal, then it might not be doable. But if we can, I think it would be an incredible, it could just give us some incredible tools and save us, you know, trying to change the way our reports work. And like, there's a lot of work that we have to do right now to improve reports and things like that, to make them more clear, etc. That I think like there is a cost there too that is kind of endless. And if we could instead just use the Cypress or Playwright output, that almost completely negates our need for like trying to create clarity. Certainly we can't create clarity on the level that they can. Like we just can't, like there's nothing that kind of, I mean, that you need the whole Cypress or Playwright team, like level of expertise and manpower and whatever, people power. So, like, I think there is an invisible cost of that we should also take into account, that we will have to pay for not using these technologies.
The things that these are good points, and I hadn't realized how much sort of stuff that like extra stuff that Cypress could do. The things that I am thinking about and would consider before trying to do them is, one, how usable are these actual things? It looks like from the Cypress, like looking around through the Cypress docs, it's like to actually go back and look at the command log, which is like its test output. You have to have something running on your own, like you have to have your own Cypress server running. I can't tell if it's like you need the proprietary one or not. If there's a
That's
proprietary
where I
one,
needed that's where I needed to do more research.
Yeah.
You should be able to do it yourself. That I think I did gather. But is there an easy GitHub way to do it? Like way through GitHub, or like, is there a way we could give people through on their DocAssemble server? Like, I mean, there's other smaller things like, I believe at least Playwright and probably Cypress 2 can download a file without, just take the required amount of time that it takes to download a file. Like right now, the way we download a file is we just take the full time out. And then if it happens within that time, that's great. And if not, then it errors. And if it's a really small file, it takes just as long as a really big file. And so there are probably other small things like that.
I think a lot of these smaller things though, like will eventually get better in Puppeteer. So I essentially like that. I think you have a strong point that like the reasons I think the reasons we would change would be because like they do things that we will never be able to do in Puppeteer. Not like small patches that like, oh, we could maybe fix this with a bit of extra code on our side. And there are some solutions in Puppeteer that I've seen for like the file downloading stuff and a lot of the smaller things. But you're right, we're never going to be able to do like DOM level like recording and revert like playback of stuff. And that's a very strong reason to move over. But I think that the thing I'm also now is just trying to consider is it actually useful for people like outside of the three of us, or not useful but usable, like not like if the minimum thing is you have to like download Node and run your own server. I'm skeptical. I'm skeptical, and so that's like just keeping that in mind. And then the other side of it is how useful that ends up being, because it definitely is useful, but there's still the entire side of like everything behind the scenes on the Docker server, on the DocAssemble side, is still hidden. Like recording the DOM is not going to help you figure out like what logic error you have in your code.
Yes,
like
it won't, but it'll like neither can we, right? Like it would give people more than we can give. That's all. Like,
yeah, that's fair. But like, it's one of those, like, how much more would you get from like a video?
It's true. It's true.
And so like, or at least it would give us a lot more than a video, but like the most like average user, would they get a lot more from like a DOM replay than a video?
DOM replay than screenshots, I think is what we're saying. So like a flip book, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. It's
I feel like most of the times I've had errors.
That was the question I was gonna bring up. Yeah.
And so that's
like how much more do people need? And some of that may be like if we get a few more users, if we can see what's still missing, like we can more easily like assess whether this kind of output would be more useful to them. But it's true that like a lot of the like DOM replay is very useful if you have elements that you created and you want to see why they're not, you
Yeah.
know, showing the right fields and things like that.
It's
Which
very
I think
useful
would
for
be very
JavaScript stuff.
useful. Yeah, for example, for our development of like, and I do admit this was some, you know, some of it was a selfish like, well, then, you know, I could examine the date fields and see what's going on. But I think that whether or not our snapshots are enough, if people could replay what was going on back and forth, they would feel more comfortable about being able to examine what happened. Like, I think that's just a more comfortable way to interact with what happened. That wouldn't be, I think, as big a thing. But yeah, I don't think that would be the deciding factor for me. It's true. So yeah, maybe it's worth also waiting until we have a few more users to see outside the project, to see if there really is something missing that needs to be, you know, desperately added. Yeah, and also how, like, if it's not that big a lift, like if it really is a matter of like just changing click to like .tap, right, or something. Like, for example, they handle testing multiple browsers more easily, I believe, and handle testing multiple types of devices. So, because right now using Puppeteer's click is just useless. We've had to replace that completely ourselves, and I think part of why Puppeteer hasn't worked on that is, I think, because things like Playwright have. I could be wrong, so maybe worth exploring. But so yeah, I think there are some quality of life things that could change. So I would like to understand if it's worth it, and that includes assessing how big of a lift it would be.
Yeah, that's
All
fair.
those things are true. But yeah, really good things to bring up. I'm glad I brought it up, but yeah, really good things to think about. Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I mean, this
I'm
has
good,
been kind of
yeah.
your baby, and I think it's fine to try iterating on a branch. Even if it takes a year to do, right? Like it's about your choice about how you allocate your time.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yep. I don't think it's an urgent change. Just
Okay.
yeah, something. I think a conversation worth keeping alive.
sure.
Okay.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious. This might be a good time to ask. I've been running into an issue with GBLS's server recently, where I think it's tied to high usage. The server stops being able to, it runs into errors assembling certain PDFs. And I'm wondering if that's something I can set up with a scheduled task to try. It seems to be tied to the state of the LibreOffice process on that server. So it's not like anything changed in the repository. Just it gets kind of hung up, and DocAssemble just fails to process the PDF correctly. I think that maybe part of this is fixed in the way that exceptions are handled in the newest version of DocAssemble, which I didn't install yet. I thought I would give it a chance to make sure to introduce new bugs first. But what do you think? I think that Michael is Hofrichter. He's running automated scheduled tests, right? Using code.
Yeah. So is this a question about Kiln or a question about LibreOffice?
Yeah, I think I lost the question there.
If you run through the made interview on GBLS's server, and maybe even a smaller demonstration interview would work too,
Mhm.
because it seems to, like, the other thing that they use that server for a lot is sending out forms to get signed. then a few times I had to restart the server
Mhm.
to get it to work because LibreOffice was hung up in some way. But you would run into an error on the screen. So it
If
seems
you
like a
run
Kiln
into an
test
error
would
on the
test it.
screen, then Kiln would catch that if you schedule the tests. Yeah.
But yeah, I think I just got to figure out the.
So if it's,
feels
I
like
mean,
maybe I
if
have to
it's an
do-
intermittent issue, or do you mean that the server gets into a state where it is stuck with this error?
It seems to be that.
The latter, okay.
Yeah, and I'm
then
trying to
Kiln
figure
would
out
catch
if
that.
there's a way to predict when it would happen. I mean, I think generally by the time it happens, it's a busy time of day, and then
Mm.
someone will email me and say it happened twice. So
Mm.
maybe a scheduled task wouldn't catch that unless I scheduled it for the middle of the day. But maybe just point the error notification emails to me.
Yeah. I mean, you can try scheduling it for off hours and see if it ever catches it. You know, it might be worth just trying if you don't know whether it is associated with traffic or not. Because maybe it is something that happens overnight and you could catch it before. I mean, busy hours is when people would report it. So it's not surprising if people are, if that's when you hear about it. So I don't know if that's necessarily an indication that that's when it starts happening.
That's a good point. Yeah.
And if it doesn't, then you can always turn off the schedule, right? So I don't know.
Yeah, so Bryce, you linked me to Hall Monitor, which this would require running it through to the end. And that's something that exists as well, right? You're just running a regular Kiln test, but on a schedule.
Yes. Yeah, all this is doing is just like, they would just be that one, those specific lines I linked to. You would just take any given Kiln, like Kiln workflow in the GitHub, and you would just have on like schedule cron or whatever, instead of, I think it's normally like on branch push, or something like that. You would just add the schedule cron, and that makes it a scheduled thing.
Okay.
If you look at some of the more recent, like recently added tests, I've added a commented out section to the, or I could give it to you. I mean, I could give you the
I think it's going to be the same
section
one.
for the cron job. Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's cool. I didn't see that. All right.
it'll be, I think you probably have lower schedule or lower schedule time. I think that one's running every hour. It's just cron syntax though, which I would guess. I actually don't
I think mine is once a week, so I mean, you'd need something in between those anyway, so. But I do provide links for there's good links for generating your cron.
And I guess I would want to run this on production and figure out how to avoid it infecting the stats.
That's a different part. Yeah, I was thinking of that.
Oh. Yeah.
That's however Google Analytics does it, but I don't think GitHub will be like visiting from the same IP each time. So I don't know if you can really do that. Like IP filtering. I'm not sure how GitHub handles that. I guess you could do it. You could do it on a test server a few times and then look at the analytics and see, oh, this particular server, like, or it's coming from this IP. And then if it runs again the next day, you can see if it's the same IP or a different IP. And I don't know how easy Google Analytics makes it to filter out that sort of traffic after it happens, or do you have to do it before it starts?
Does Puppeteer, would it run it would load the Google Analytics?
I mean,
Yeah,
it
because
runs,
it's just-
it's just a
Just running
human.
Chrome.
It's just a,
Well, yeah, it's just Chrome.
I don't.
It's just running
use
Chrome.
Google Analytics. When I visit a page, I have it blocked on my server. On my
Oh,
browser.
you have it. You have it up.
Yeah.
You have your block origin or whatever.
yeah, this is just there's nothing special about the browser. There's no
No extension.
settings or plugins or
You would need to
anything.
explicitly block it to do that. Yeah. Or maybe if it's set do not track, but I guess
I can check with the
I never trust you that trick, but I don't know.
Yeah, I
puppeteer.
guess it may not really work for something like that. Okay, and then I have to figure out a way to filter it from the interview stats. Maybe the way to solve it is really just to start getting those the error notification emails for now. That assumes someone's going to run into it before I do, but I suspect that's what's happening anyway. That it's, I guess maybe I could trigger it earlier by doing a random one at night. Obviously, it's not great to have someone run into an error and then have to do something about it. Okay, well, maybe also there's a better targeted solution because that has something to do with the status of the LibreOffice process on the server.
Yeah, that's what I thought. That's why I was confused because I thought you were starting off and was trying to get suggestions on how to fix that, which definitely feels like the good fix, but I don't. Probably a bit harder to try and diagnose. Yeah.
It's really hard to say because on the server I was not running Uno Conv, which is the batch process version of LibreOffice.
Yeah.
But someone told me, oh, I also, because I'd shared the first time this happened, I shared a link to my server, the Lemma Legal server, and I said, you can use this until I'm able to go in, make a proper backup, and then rebuild the server, because I suspect it's just something to do with the age of the server. Then a week later, the problem recurred. They had the same issue on my server. They said they reported, at least. I'm not sure it was literally the same thing because users aren't always good at saying what it is that went wrong.
Yeah.
And that one was running UnoConf the whole time. So it's like a different failure mode, essentially. And that means to me, I don't know that I could easily detect if it's something exactly what's wrong. I don't know, but
yeah,
I guess that's the issue. But I do know that restarting it seems to resolve it.
Yeah.
Temporary solution, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, that's better than nothing.
Oh, think about it. Maybe the emails is the first solution because that's low key, and at least I'll know about it a little earlier. Let me show you one more thing. This is a weird one. So here is Rate by PDF on a small device. It does have breakpoints. I probably could figure this out on my own, but maybe you have a quick place to start, Michelle. So I don't know why this should be stacked. It should, the size should be more normal.
Yeah, what's weird, I've been playing around with this, is if you don't have it on a device and you just have it on the normal screen size, it just changed the screen. Yeah, like the tab size, it does get smaller. It's only breaking on the mobile stuff, which is why I don't know what CSS you did on it, but
well, I let the CSS get generated by ChatGPT. So
nice.
Why?
Well, I mean,
suspected that.
We could examine it and see what its media queries are. It's going to be in media queries. So
it would have taken me a very long time to write all the CSS. Well,
yeah.
400 lines.
Yeah. If we look at media.
Okay, let's check it out.
Search for @media. No results. So I'm not sure
using
where
the breakpoints in Bootstrap, I think.
Oh, I see.
So I don't know if you're familiar with those.
The thing that was throwing me off was the text size was also really small too.
You can look for MD. Look for MD and see if that is MD. Yep, form control MD. Fine.
Well, it's not really the right one. I should look at this page, I guess.
Yeah, but
well, it's a couple of places, I guess. Yeah,
so I mean, if you haven't changed any @media queries in your CSS, then it should just be behaving the way that Bootstrap behave. You know what I mean? Like it's you just might want to change the 4 to, is it going to be a 3 or something like that?
So weird that this is looking correct. But when I change it to saying it's a mobile device, it's not.
That is strange. Well, the thing is that you're zoomed out. So right now you're 390 across, and it may be that when you are, if you change it to it, that when your
It's
screen
not,
is,
I have
well,
checked
this
this.
is 800, and that is behaving appropriately. But you can try to change to. And
I have checked this. If you so like if you grab one of the edges, this is Firefox, right? If you grab one of the edges, you can just change the size, and you get back to 390. It's
that
completely different. Like the responsive sizing is just different than what gets sent to a mobile device. And it's not like a weird. I did check and make sure it wasn't a weird quirk on like Firefox doing this, because mobile it looks like that on my phone too, and so I just don't know what's going on.
So on your phone, it looks like how Quentin showed it originally before he dragged it with the.
Yes, really tiny and stuff.
So this is weird because when I resize it and then bring it back, it doesn't make any sense. 375 by 812.
The only thing I can guess is that it's a user agent thing. Like because the user agent changes when you set it to a mobile device, but I have no idea what you would be sending differently as a user agent, or like what would be changing
Why would
because
that
you sent a
control?
different user agent.
Yeah. I mean, because that's the whole point. The breakpoints are supposed to be based on size of the screen.
Yep.
That's
I
at least
mean,
the way I understood the Bootstrap documentation.
it is supposed to be based on the viewport. So, but this is not this is like a thing to file a bug in Bootstrap, right? Because, I mean, we can also try and handle it ourselves, right? I'll try and look up
Just setting the user agent doesn't seem to have done it,
bug.
unless I haven't actually changed it. Okay. Device pixelation. Okay, I don't seem to be able to control that here. Huh. All right, well,
I mean, the viewport is. You shouldn't have to change. I don't think it's I think it's the viewport that Bootstrap detects. So.
all right, well.
Yeah,
I
if it's any consolation, I don't think it's anything you're doing wrong. So.
Yeah. I mean, I like to have a responsive design. I think it is a bit less likely somebody will be trying to visit it on.
You can try changing
Cool.
things
I am
to
not
small
super
instead
confident.
of medium, but
What's that?
you can try changing things to SM instead of MD and see if they behave differently. I don't know why they would, but maybe.
And I was going to say, I'm not super confident that people just aren't going to visit it on mobile. Like, yeah, they might not use it seriously on mobile, but 100%, like the first time someone's going to see it is going to be is likely going to be on mobile somewhere. And so they'll be like, oh, let me try it. Like I know I have something downloaded or on Google Drive. Let me figure that out. But then they'll come to this and they'll be like, oh, this is very hard to see anything. And it's just going to be off.
Okay. Well, there's something missing. I'll play around with it a little bit. And see if
this says that website need the viewport meta tag in order to resize correctly when viewed in the F12 developer tools.
Well,
But it
But it
shouldn't
is the
be
same link,
affecting, it shouldn't be affecting, I mean, I'll give you the link to this Stack
Sure.
Overflow answer anyway, and you can try adding that to your head tag and see if that helps.
I definitely
But
think
that
would-
shouldn't, but if Bryce isn't viewing it in, if Bryce is actually viewing it on his phone, that shouldn't be a problem, but it's worth a shot. I don't know, this isn't, I feel like this is old, and so this shouldn't be a problem anymore, but who knows, sometimes things don't get fixed for a while.
Okay, let me see if I can find that. Yeah, I can add it.
So that's at the head, that's
No, it's
above
not
your
there anymore.
body.
But the link is broken.
Oh. The Stack Overflow link is broken, or?
It's just, well, that just tells you the age of it. The link, I guess the site structure's changed somehow.
That does seem to fix it.
When you just add that to the HTML?
Yeah, I just added it to the HTML on the like just in browser tools, and it did make things at least resize so you can read them. It's a little, there's some
But
little,
it might,
there's some padding that needs to change on mobile too, but it's not small anymore.
but it might
Was
have
it
been
this-
just because you edited the HTML. That might have done the same thing as like dragging the size
I'll
of the,
double check that, but I'm fairly,
Okay.
yeah, let me see.
Interesting point. Okay. So then you did inspect, you edited something in the HTML. Okay.
Yeah, went to head, edit as HTML, and then just added that one like meta tag.
Okay. Which tag did you add specifically? Was it the example?
At the very
Yeah.
bottom, it was meta name equals viewport content equals width equals
I'll
device.
just paste that. I'll
Yeah.
paste
Okay.
that in the Zoom.
Okay. So maybe I'll just add that to the head.
Let's see if that works. Okay.
Yeah, if I just edit head, otherwise it doesn't seem to actually change anything. But
Okay,
adding that does.
that's
So-
promising then. Yeah.
Very weird. Okay. So just a little bit. That's great. Great. Good find. I'm glad I asked. That was bugging me. So,
Well, we'll see if it works in anything other than the developer tools. That's the question. Is if it works on an actual mobile device, I think is.
Yeah, and I can't
A
tell.
real-
That's a hard. That we need to just push to prod for that. I think.
yeah.
Or
Which-
no, I guess we could do it locally if actually.
do you
Yeah,
have a
I
way
could-
to
Well, just
access-
I by default run things like on my network, and so I can just
Okay.
access things from my phone whenever I run on the network. So
Okay.
yeah, if I get set up, no promises on when I'll do this, but if I get set up on the PDF or rate my PDF repo and can get it running locally, I can test it and see if that works on the phone. So
It seems like it shouldn't hurt to add this anyway, so I should probably add this.
how did you find that, Michelle? Was it just Bootstrap? Like
I
That
mean, I
device
searched
size?
for like bootstrap breakpoint bug, right? Doesn't stack. Doesn't stack. Doesn't stack.
okay.
A small viewport. But it just, yeah, it was just a random.
Okay, no, I was just curious because I remember finding it and not knowing anything on how to actually figure out what was going on. So
Yeah. I
Well, this
mean,
could
there
be
are
a
other
reason.
ones that aren't as useful, but yeah. So matter of luck. What, Quentin?
Oh, I guess this could be a reason to kind of push some of those changes. Yeah. Waiting for it to start up with the locally running just to make sure we're not expecting isn't fooling us.
Okay.
That seems to work for me. Just adding that before. Okay. Yeah, like you said, there's some other things that need to change. A little bit more padding or vertically for the cards and stuff like that. And the buttons a little bit more vertical. Okay. Well, anyway, it's kind of cool. Now I know a little bit more about using background processing. And it makes me think that some of the DocAssemble background stuff that's really complicated that we're doing, maybe we should just write our own JavaScript to do it instead of trying to use some of those background processes.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, I'd be down.
We might be
We could-
able to make stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'd be interested to if Redis was a lot as it was a bit easier, and if we could just add a bit of JavaScript, add a bit of Redis stuff, or if that isn't the hard part, and you think it's just the heavy like page reload that we just should avoid.
Well, yeah, like the way that DocAssemble does it, where it like reloads the whole page. Yeah, exactly. Like that's not really necessary, I think. But and that only checks every 10 seconds. Also doesn't really seem that necessary.
Yeah, there is the check-in. I guess check-in can go only goes 10 seconds, but check-in, like there's some weird JavaScripty stuff you can do such that you don't have to reload the whole page, but I haven't gotten into it because it is also just weird and heavy-handed and not a great API.
What is this y'all are talking about at this point?
Sorry, we have,
DocAssemble's background tasks. It has its own system for it, and I always find it very confusing. And now I feel like maybe it doesn't have to be as confusing as it is.
But you're talking about
Or as
JavaScript reloading the whole page or
no.
that's how it works.
rebuilding the whole DocAssemble? Okay.
Yeah, so
Well,
DocAssemble just triggers a like in browser page reload
Mhm.
to like update things. And I think when you were saying for most of the stuff that we use, like need background tasks for, or would be considering background tasks for, we don't need to reload the whole page. We can throw up something, the user reads it, and as they're reading it, like we have some extra JavaScript on the page that is querying some background task running on DocAssemble, and we can just use that and then immediately, like within a few seconds, like show the result of that background task instead of having to like only check every 10 seconds. And when we get it, refresh the whole page.
If we get this working, I'd love to use it on the kiln in the playground. Yeah, I think that could.
Yeah, I really like that. It's really interesting, by the way, Michelle. I gave it a try. I had some ideas, but one was like
awesome.
maybe throwing a loading animation on there would be.
I tried.
Oh, really?
I tried to get a spinner working. I didn't
Spinner
try
was-
for a long time, but the spinner was broken. So I mean,
Okay.
I can figure it out and add a loading spinner at some point. But yeah, it was harder than I thought it would be.
The spinner was weird. We couldn't figure that out.
Oh, I'll show you
Um,
my animation, which I think is pretty cool
Yeah.
design.
All right.
I didn't make it from scratch, but I did have to took a lot of prompting. All right, let me upload a new one. I like to test with the 1040. I think that's a really good representative one. I have to make sure it's one I haven't tested.
Is it just really long?
It takes a while to load, but let's see. We should see the animation at least for a little bit, even if it's one never. Yeah, that was too fast.
Yeah, no, I saw it. It was a document, right?
Yeah,
The document moving. That's nice.
I don't know if that like
you can't use that exact one.
for the test. Yeah, but
Is it a GIF? Is it just a animation in CSS?
It's this SVG animation.
okay.
I didn't know SVG could do animation.
It is a
Oh.
first feature of SVG. You use
Oh.
CSS keyframes, and then it can directly animate the elements of SVG.
Yeah.
Oh, so you just have two different SVGs and it's
Nope,
Like-
it's one SVG, and you're animating the individual like lines and stuff.
oh, okay, cool.
SVG. Yeah, you can. Yeah,
That's nice.
CSS can do that.
Anyway,
Very nice.
it took me a while to figure out what animation I wanted it to be. And then
I like it.
it did a lot
Yeah.
of the work for me. Could still be refined a little bit if I knew better how to edit it backend, but
That's pretty cool.
Mm.
and then like just the little ellipses animation there too. It's not exactly what I wanted it to look like, but I wanted it to be more like a typewriter effect than that.
Okay.
Anyway, it did. If we wanted to try to show like in between status progresses, we could log those to Redis, but then we'd have to, that would have to be added into Form Fixer. So I decided that's probably not worth it.
Which updates? Sorry.
If we wanted to do interim updates and say, hey, we finished processing passive voice, now we're doing this
Oh.
thing, we would have to
Yes.
directly talk to Redis queue from within Form Fixer.
Well, I've done stuff like that before in other things. You end up just, the only thing you really need to do is just to the Form Fixer API, add a like update callback, and then whatever it, like, oh, I'm 10 steps in, like just call it with however many parameters you need or whatever. And then the Redis stuff you can just pass in. Like it doesn't have to, Form Fixer doesn't ever have to know about Redis.
Interesting.
Interesting.
Like it would be a webhook, or when you say callback, it could be a Python
Even-
function.
Yeah, even less than a webhook, just literally a Python function. And then when you call Form Fixer, you make your Python function something that, oh, it takes in the amount of progress and then it pushes that to Redis or whatever. And then you pass that function to Form Fixer. And as long as it's still all in Python, then it's that works pretty well. That's what I've done for similar things in the past when I have to try to like have updates go into GUIs and stuff like that, essentially.
I'd be interested in a tutorial on like how you do this, but yeah, cool. That
Well,
sounds
maybe
awesome.
I'll add an issue to Form Fixer just so it can be like a future thing. That'd be nice.
It's a pretty minor one too.
Okay. Well, we started early and we're still managing to end like just about right on time. Anything else? Anything else? Good.
I don't think so.
Okay. All right. Well, I'm gonna jump back into academic paper editing mode mostly, I think, for today. But
Exciting.
yeah, not really. Yeah, you were saying, Michelle, you were in like you wanted to know if that's something you wanted to do someday. It's like it has kind of low
Probably
value
not.
unless your work ties to it, I think. But it's good.
Well, I
It's
just-
interesting, but
I mean,
it's part of
the
how we're evaluated, essentially.
being part of the academic community, I think, is more the actual writing of the paper, maybe not, but like being an active part of the academic community sounds.
It's all it is, though. It's just writing papers.
Yeah, really?
Always has been.
You never get anything back. You just throw it into the void and
Very much, yeah.
oh, wow.
Like going
that
to
doesn't sound
conferences
as
and
fun.
stuff. Going to conferences and stuff can sometimes works, but like you throw all your stuff into the void, you very rarely get like wider feedback on it. And like
Maybe
the
it's
stuff
not
we're
what I
doing.
want then.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm never
We've
doing
gotten a lot
anything
more feedback
anyone's
from real
interested in.
users than I think we'll probably get.
Huh?
We've gotten a lot of feedback from like courts and stuff, right? And
Okay.
we've gotten some feedback from course and NCSC and
Yeah.
I bet it
Mostly-
will end up mounting to more useful insights than I'll get them.
Yeah, like the tool that we have made, we get more feedback from than the actual writing of the paper. And that's the thing. It's like,
All right. Maybe it's not what I want
and,
to.
you, and you're already contributing back to like extra stuff in Form Fixer and stuff. So I think you're where you want to be.
All right. Then I'm golden. Very cool.
And you will get a citation. You'll get a acknowledgement.
Acknowledgement, right? Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Cool. I'll be in a paper. I'll have to tell my family. Cool.
All right.
I'll print it and mount it on the wall.
I think I get one copy of the thing for free, but
Oh, that's awesome.
I'll let you see the physical bound book if you want at the
Awesome.
conference proceeding. I'll
Cool.
probably keep it on my shelf, but you can certainly see it sometime.
Yeah.
All right. I guess that's it. We'll catch up at the end of the week.
All right.
Nice to see
Thanks.
you on Teams.
Take care.